So we've been in the weeds talking about really the bits and bytes of how to wrangle this data. We haven't talked much about the baseball value of the data. I mean, clearly pitch charting, if we start to look at the way Kershaw has pitched, these different right and left-handers, even, we could go back and look at the way he's pitched particular batters. And because baseball has made this available, you could go look through the entire year. So there's no limit to, what the teams are doing with this data. But I thought another thing that we do is, and it's not represented in the data, you'd have to build this count yourself. I thought let's throw a markdown code in here, markdown cell, and say, let's add a ball strike count. So if you remember, as we go through this, if we open up one of these at bats, and this first one had multiple pitches, we've got pitch, 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 but we don't really have the count. It does not keep the count, but it assumes that you could, because we know this was a foul ball, we know that every at-bat starts out 0-0. No balls, no strikes, and now after this foul ball, it's no balls, one strike. So we could add that to the data frame. And let's do that. Let's walk through and add to the data frame what the count is before the pitch is thrown. So, and where we'll go with this, we'll add another cell, and let's call it the Kershaw tendency by pitch count. So there's our markdown for the code to come. And in between these two, we'll select this one and we'll say insert a cell below. Let's add the ball and strike count to the data frame. So we're going to go through and we're going to walk the data frame, and we're going to see which at-bats are the first pitch of the at-bat. We'll set the count to 0-0, and then we'll classify each pitch, and we'll keep the count current throughout the data frame. So let's do a couple things to get started as we try to map these pitches or walk through the pitches in order to develop a count, and we're going to put a count right in the actual data frame. So data frame, PitchDF is the data frame we've been using. We're looking at the DES field because you remember there's a DES for the at-bat, which is the overall outcome, and there's also a DES for each pitch. And let's just say print unique DES list, and we'll run that. So there's the outcomes. There's the pitch outcomes that we got throughout the entire database. So again, we walked the data frame and we looked at all the DESs and all the uniques, and we have fouls, we have swinging strikes, balls, called strikes. So that's what we need. That's what we need to get started. Let's comment that out and keep going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to develop a couple variables that are going to help us hold this, and let's say ball call list, and it equals empty array, and we've got a strike call list, which is also an empty array, and I'm going to say ball count equals 0 and strike count equals 0. And now for index, so I can pull off the index of the row, and I can also pull off the row itself in pitch df dot iterate rows. So as we walk through it, we'll say the DES equals the row designation. And let's just go ahead and print those out. And as I always do, forgot my colon. And now here's the outcomes. Here's the pitch by pitch outcomes. So we're getting what we hope to. Let's keep going. We'll comment that out. Well, we've already got that commented out. So we're printing the DES. Now what we want to say is if the row, so one thing we know is every at-bat starts out 0, 0. And AB index is the at-bat index. And if that equals 1, so that's the first pitch. If you remember, we already created a counter that we incremented every time there was a new pitch to this batter. So if we're looking at the first pitch to that batter, then we know that ball count equals 0 and strike count is going to equal 0. So that much is known, and what we want to do is we want to keep incrementing this count. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to rely on these variables as we come back through, because we'll end up looking at the row, seeing what the disposition was for that row, and then incrementing only 1 or possibly none. If you foul a ball off while you've got 2 strikes, well, you still have 2 strikes. So we're going to decide pitch by pitch based on the outcome of the pitch, the designation, the DES of the pitch. We're going to decide whether or not that incremented the counters, and then we're going to write that counter to the row that's coming up. And that's why these columns. So that's why we have, oops, let's fix that while we're there. That's why we have these empty columns, is so we can keep the entire pitch designation or the entire count of these. So we're going to build 2 new columns, and then we're going to add those columns to the database itself, to the data frame. So it's a little tricky right here. I hope you understand where I'm going. It'll make more sense when we print out the data frame for the first time. But basically what we're going to do is right here, we're going to go ahead and save the count, because as you can imagine, the very first pitch of the game, it is a 0, 0 count. We recognize that here and we set it. So now we want to save into the ball column list, and we save by appending, and we put in the ball count, which again on this very first record is going to be 0, as will the strike column list. Dot append. Okay, and then and only then do we want to look at the at-bat and say if ball, now if you remember, and we can scroll down here and look, there's a ball in the dirt. So there's more than one way to get a ball. They designate a ball in the dirt versus just a regular ball. So we don't care which it was. We're saying if the word ball is in des, because here we said des is the designation for that pitch. If it's in des, then we're going to definitely increment the ball count. Okay. Elif foul. Now on a foul, it's not automatic that it's a strike. So if that's in des, then we want to say if strike count is not 2, then strike count equals strike count plus 1. So we're increment it if it's not already 2 strikes. Okay, and now we'll come all the way back, same level of logic, and say if the word strike is in des, then we definitely want to, if it was a called strike, then it increments to strike count. Okay. So I think that's enough logic. I think that's really all we need to do. A ball's a ball, a strike is a strike, and a foul is only a strike if you don't already have 2. So at that point, really all we need to do is we need to say the pitch data frame that we're working on we're going to create a new column called BallCount, and we're going to set that column equal to the entire list. Same here, and we say strike count. So this new column called strike count in the pitch DFX or DF data frame is equal to the strike count. Okay. Now, when we run this, we get an error, of course. And the length of values does not match. And I see two reasons why. First of all, I picked the wrong variable off the list. This should be the strike column list, because again, we're trying to create a new column by using the array that we built, that we put one ball and one strike in the two different arrays. Now the other thing I see, and this is classic for us long-term Java programmers, we had the wrong indentation level. So this was running inside the for loop. It was indented to the same level it was running every time, and therefore there was a mismatch in the number of elements that were in the list. So at this point it should run. Now it didn't produce any output, but that also means it didn't produce any errors. So let's do this. Let's pick this cell and let's say insert a cell below, and now we'll just grab pitch data frame and we'll have it output the head. And there we go. So now maybe you start to see what our issue was, or the reason we had to go ahead and commit as soon as we knew what the position, the ordinal within the at-bat. So this is at-bat number 1, and this is pitch 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in that at-bat. Well, we know when the at-bat starts, before this pitch is thrown, it's 0-0. Now we look at the designation, it ended up being a foul ball, and we know before this second pitch is thrown that the count must be 0-1. We know that that was a swinging strike, so we know that before the third pitch was thrown, it's 0-2. And again, with the ball 1-2, with a foul, or with this ball, the second ball, 2-2. So when this pitch starts, when pitch number 5 starts, we're sitting at a 2-2 count. Now, the reason we did that is what we'd like to do. Let's go with that now, with these two rows, or these two columns in our data frame. We can now start to say, show me all the 0-0 counts. And let's look at what Clayton Kershaw threw with that count. Let's look at what he threw when the count was 2-2.